Hey everyone, welcome back to the arena. I'm MD, joined here by Covey, and once again, we'll introduce a really special guest who's been a part of a few different arenas that we're excited to get into. Love and appreciation to our followership as always, and yeah, can't wait to introduce him.
What's going on, guys? Like MD said, we do have another guest here. This is Clayton Echard. Is it Echard?
Echard.
Echard. Clayton Echard. Clayton is a realtor in Scottsdale, and I will say more importantly, he probably wouldn't, but mental health speaker. He's also known by many for his role both as a contestant on The Bachelorette and then also as the Bachelor himself in season 26. So, with that, Clayton, why don't you just provide an overview of who is Clayton Echard and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so first off, appreciate y'all having me on. I know we're going to have some great discussions, and it's so important that more of these conversations occur. I think I'm starting to see some headway, but of course, the more that we share individual stories, the better off we'll all be, and the more we can learn. So, super pumped to have this convo. But I just had this conversation with someone literally earlier today, and they said, "What do you want us to label you as? You know, what do you when we create this video? What do you want to put for your title?" And I gave them two labels. I said I said that I was an agent, real estate agent, and I also was a mental health advocate. But I'm like, you know what I realized as of recently was with all the labels in my past, they had an endpoint. And I realized that a lot of times, like when I was an athlete and my career ended, there's this issue with identity loss. You find it with athletes where all of a sudden they're no longer an athlete after playing sports in their entire life, and then they start to think, who am I? You know, I'm no longer an athlete. So when somebody asks me like, what do I do? It's like, well, who am I at this point? And I felt that same way from sports, and then when I was the Bachelor, same thing. All of a sudden that was gone, and I was like, okay, I'm not the Bachelor anymore, so who am I? And I just got to this place where I'm like, I need to find something that can describe me from start to finish, from like my first breath to my last breath. And so I realized less is more. So I don't know if it sounds kind of, woo woo or hippie, but I like it. For me, when people ask who I am, I just like to say I am me. That's nothing more, nothing less. I can tell people the things that I'm currently doing, but if you were to ask me what I am, I'm just me, and I don't think it has to be more than that. So, and then people can find out through the things that I'm currently doing exactly what I am. But that's the way I like to describe it. I don't know. For me, I don't have to overthink it. It's just I am who I am.
Yeah, no, no, I do love that. I wonder, like, and you say I am me. Maybe talk about how your relationship with you yourself, how has that evolved? Just internally, maybe as you've grown up, gone through these different challenges, highs and lows in life. Like, how has your relationship with yourself evolved?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have much of a positive relationship with myself. Starting from seventh grade, it's when my mental health struggles started to begin. And what it first looked like was in seventh grade, all I had in my life were relationships and sports. That's really, I feel like all most kids have. We don't have these work obligations. We don't have to put food on the table for a future for our family. For me, I played sports and I hung out with friends. And, then when hormones hit, it was like I wanted to date, the girls in my class. But I struggled in those realms. So, for sports, I wasn't a good, athlete. Freshman year of high school, I was a fourth string quarterback. I did not make my baseball team in tryouts, and then I was on the bench for basketball. And then, with the women in my grade, I was known as the big brother. That was my nickname. So I was friend zoned by all the girls I wanted to date. It only seemed for me to get worse, whereas my brother, then who was 2 years younger, when he stepped in his freshman year of high school, which I was a junior at that point, he started varsity football while I was on JV as a junior. So the indicators of success in my life were sports and relationships, and I felt like I was failing in both. So I just didn't have a good viewpoint or a good self-love. I lacked it. And I then took it upon myself to try to find a way to become adequate in the eyes of others. So I became a people pleaser. I was trying to find ways to impress those individuals. So when I walked in a room, people would, ooh and ah, and they would think, wow, this guy has really accomplished a lot. So I was chasing external validation. And the first way that I thought, well, if you don't feel good enough as an athlete, then become a better athlete. So I started trying to just elevate my level of play. I got in the weight room and I thought I got to get bigger, stronger, faster. That's how I'm going to become a better athlete. So I started to do that and started, getting opportunities to play at the next level. And I say opportunities, I just walked on. I didn't have any scholarship offers. But when I told my parents I was going to walk on at Mizzou, they got so excited. And I realized in that moment, I want to play football, but I'm really doing it for them because that was the first time that I'd seen so much excitement when it came to them and sports with me. So I thought, wow, this is awesome. Like, I want to continue to recreate this. So, I went to play college ball, then briefly played for the Seahawks. But then at the end of it all, I still felt like I wasn't good enough. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe it's because I never felt good enough in the eyes of women. So, as I started to try to build this physicality, this physique that I thought would impress women, I also thought, I had this show come around, The Bachelorette, and I thought, well, if I'm on a TV show, I didn't think this consciously at the time, but I thought I was just accepting so they reached out to me, and I thought, okay, I'm just taking this opportunity because I'm not happy with my work. But the reality was I wasn't happy with my life in general. I was just living a life that I thought would impress others. Again, I was a medical sales rep. I thought that was impressive. I told people when they asked me, what do you do for work? I was like, I'm an orthopedic medical device sales rep. And I spit out that mouthful because saying I was a sales rep just didn't sound impressive enough in my head. So I had to say it, orthopedic. And I would even spell it, in my LinkedIn bio with an AE spelling. It's like it's not the English spelling version of it, but it was like was it British, or I don't even know which version it is, but I was purposely spelling it that way because I thought it looked cooler. I thought it seemed more impressive. And, so, that I kept trying to find little things like that and didn't know it until after the show. But the whole reason I went, became the Bachelor, not the whole reason, but a large part of it was, I thought if I was the Bachelor, people would finally think that I'm good enough. It's like, oh, like I'm the most sought after man in America. So now I'm no longer the big brother, and that validation I'm seeking, I'm going to finally find it. And still didn't get the validation from it. I mean, temporarily.
I was going to say temporarily, like bits and moments, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. A lot of times people are like, well, I was like, listen, there were a lot, these with football and with the show, I received temporary validation and it helped. But the problem is it's fleeting. It goes away. And then whenever it goes away, it's like, well, now what? Now you're left with yourself. And do you truly love yourself, and can you survive off of the internal validation? Well, I never had the internal validation. So doing those things didn't provide me with that internal validation, and that's when I realized I had to reflect and look within myself, because all along I was trying to fill the void of validation with the external validation, and I needed to be addressing it with finding internal validation. And so that's what I've taken upon myself in the last year or two, is to start finding that internal validation.
There's a lot of content out these days that talk about being a high value man, and it's about how athletic you are, what's your social status with women, what car are you driving, how much money do you make. Seems like you are caught trying to, much like a lot of us, we are always trying to get the validation around those types of maybe tangible measurements of value. This version of Clayton that we're speaking with, where he's like, this is me, I'm just me, right? What are the tangible measurements of value that you see of yourself now that are different from maybe the ones you were chasing in the past?
Yeah, I think now that's a great question, and it's so true. I mean, growing up, if you ask me, what is we always use this vernacular, real man, It's like, that's a real man. You know, real man doesn't show emotion. He just like, if he doesn't cry, you know, he fights it out. You know, if he hits someone harder on the football field, you know, rub some dirt on it. If you cut open a wound on your body, it's like, basically it was this tough guy mentality. I mean, that was at least the environment that I was raised in. And so it was always trying to be a real man, and what that embodied. Well, it had all the muscles and had all the money, and every girl wanted them. Like, and if you didn't have those things, and you weren't a quote unquote real man. So I was chasing that, exactly like what you just said. That's what I was chasing. But to me, then now, you know, what defines, and I don't even like to say a real man, because it's like, how about just a real human? You know, a real authentic human. That's the life that I try to live now. So basically, I just try to be as authentic as I can be. So when I walk into a room, I'm checking with myself as I'm navigating in that environment. Am I just being me, or am I trying to be something for somebody else? And if I catch myself trying to impress someone in the room, I often now start to feel a disconnect, and I realize there's no harm in trying to impress people and put your best foot forward. But if you find yourself starting to do things you wouldn't normally do, there's a big disconnect with me now. And what I find is, I'm like, I'd rather step out of that room if I feel that I have to be something completely different than who I actually want to be. So now I just kind of, I put off this energy of like, this is what I am, this is who I like, what I think I like, what I think's funny, and I naturally attract the energy that's meant for me, and then whatever's not meant for me, I repel. But it's been working really well, because I'm starting to surround myself with a lot of like-minded individuals that think in a similar manner that I do, because
How cool is that, by the way?
it's incredible, man. It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's like, I used to attract the people that I was trying to be like, but I didn't really want to be like them. But I would attract them because I was able to like kind of be a chameleon. But then you just find yourself in this position where you're like, I don't feel like myself. There's this, I can't really actually express myself truly. And now I have to live this facade of what I've, you know, constructed, because everyone thinks this is who I am, but it's really just who I've made myself out to be.
And that's really exhausting. Like, trying to be someone you're not is like you were trying to, like, your ego was getting in the way. It's like, but your spirit and your soul wasn't actually connected to these people. I mean, and I'm saying that from a place of total experience.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, like, you've just become so self-aware, and I'm just curious, how did you come to all these realizations? How have you been able to, you mentioned like reflection, but just kind of talk through how you've been able to look at things so logically, and honestly with yourself, because I think a lot of people struggle with that, or they don't even know where to start. Like, some people just feel disconnected from themselves, but they don't even know, all right, where do I go next? Now what?
Yeah. Yeah, so for me, you know, I wrote a book, and it was really therapeutic. I wrote it for myself, but then I thought, you know, well, this is great. Maybe this will help one other person. But the book outlines a lot of the process that I took personally. And the biggest thing is I didn't want it to be some like 5 steps to success. You know, I think a lot of times people, like, when they go listen to people speak, or they jump online, they're like, okay, what are the 5 keys to success that I can read in 10 minutes, and I can, you know, all of a sudden my life will change. It's like, well, that's not how this works. You know, when it comes to finding self-love, it's very much a journey, and it's going to take time, and it's very individual specific. So what worked for me may not work for somebody else. But that's why when I set, you know, when I wrote the book, I was like, I want these principles to be very general, and then people can start to narrow their focus. But just start here. Here's the starting points, and then everyone can divert off their own paths. So for me, to get to a place of understanding, and of ourselves, we have to have the conversations. We have to have the conversations with ourselves. So, you know, some people might hear that and go, well, I'm not going to talk to myself. But it's like, well, no, but this is where I thought therapy was really powerful. So therapy to me is like the sane way of talking to yourself, because you have someone that's listening there to you, and but they're not really like interjecting their opinion. It's guided mindfulness. They're allowing you to they ask you the questions, and they just let you just outpour. And what I
Wow. Sorry. Guided mindfulness.
Yeah.
I've heard therapy has been brought up a bunch in my conversations and conversations on this podcast, and I've never heard it described as such. And I think that hit for me. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, no, I can't. Someone again. I just regurgitate what I've heard from other people in conversations. But that's where the power of one conversation, communication, is so critical. And I've had many circumstances where one conversation changed my complete outlook on life. And so it's important that if someone says, "Well, I don't know where to start," I think a lot of times it's because they are seeing life through their perspective, and you need to start allowing yourself to see life through different lenses. And this is where it's hard because we all have an ego, and an ego serves a really good purpose. It's also can get in the way sometimes. But for many people, they see life as right or wrong, and I think you have to be willing to see life through other perspectives. So it's not about right or wrong; it's about an understanding. And the show was the catalyst to break down my ego, to allow me to say, okay, you know what? A lot of people don't think that what I did was right. I'm willing to admit that I might be wrong. So let me now try to develop an understanding for why people feel the way that they feel. So I called it at the time an ego sacrifice. I don't really like that terminology anymore because it almost sounds like I had to kill off my ego. And I think our egos are extremely important for our self-worth. Like our egos are what, when we look in the mirror in the morning, we're like, man, I look good. I'm going to seize the day. Like I'm going to win today. No one can stop me. That's your ego. Our egos are very impactful. And I realized I was like, I don't want to call it an ego sacrifice. Just maybe an ego check. That's what I had to do. I had to check my ego and say, listen, hey, like, we're in this together, but you gotta check yourself because I'm not gonna let you keep running rampant. And so I think first things first, people have to be willing to change and willing to allow different perspectives in, and that comes through communication. So I think that's the first step. Just start having the conversations with people, and then beyond that, the second step I think is education. You got to start just listening to people have these conversations, and so I started listening to podcasts. Jay Shetty on Purpose. He has an incredible mental health podcast. That was the one that I dove into, and I listened to it every day. I listened to an episode a day for like an entire year. And I just found that the people that had found self-love in their lives, they all used very similar language. So I thought, well, if they're all using the same language, then maybe I should start using that same language. It's like that positive self-talk. Maybe I should start to believe these words that they're saying, and slowly but surely I started to change that internal self-talk that I had.
And when you look back, are you able to identify like a rock bottom? We love a good rock bottom story here, but I'm just curious, like you mentioned the ego check sort of serving you as like a catalyst for change. I'm just curious, like, was there a pinpoint rock bottom in life, or what ultimately was your catalyst to kind of take this 180 directionally?
Yeah. My rock bottom was the night before the live finale of my season. It was a two night special, but the first night I was not involved, but I was watching it live with everybody else. I was watching it from a house. We had these things called safe houses where we would watch. I could be with at the time I was with Susie, my now ex. But we weren't able to come out yet and show everyone that we were a couple. So we were watching in this house in LA that night, and that episode had that was like the most dramatic portion of my journey, and there was a lot of people that were upset with what they watched that night. And as I'm watching the show, I had my phone with me, and I started just getting DMs. I was on Twitter reading every comment. And it was, a lot of negative commentary. People telling me to kill myself. People telling me I'm not deserving of love. People telling me that everything. He's ugly. He doesn't, like a guy like this, deserves to just be taken off the face of this earth. Like he's a waste of space. I mean, I got messages by the thousands, and they were rolling in. Just, I couldn't keep up with them. And I posted this on my Instagram. It's there. I wanted people to see this because I'm like, listen, like you can't always, like people saw me the next day. I did a side by side photo. They saw this photo of me and Susie the next day smiling, and everyone was like, look, he got to have his cake and eat it too. He didn't learn his lesson. But the night prior, 12 hours prior to that photo, I had to get up, step away from the TV because I was overwhelmed. And I went over to the window of the backyard to that home. I just stared out the window for 30 minutes, didn't say a word. And my, Susie, she captured that. She took a photo, of it. I didn't realize it in the moment, but I stared out the window and I just was thinking, why me? How did I get to this point? I had the thought, I was like, maybe it would be easier if I just wasn't here. So I started having a bit of suicidal ideation, and it wasn't that I was thinking like going to act upon it. I wouldn't say that I got to that extreme, but I just started like really questioning who I was, and I started to think, well, maybe I am this person that everyone's painting me to be, which is a monster. So that was my rock bottom point. I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Like, because what I think I am is not what everyone else seemingly thinks I am. So, like, who am I? And that was my lowest point that I ever experienced.
Well, I mean, so then, I mean, that's tough, man. I'm trying to like sit here and put myself in those shoes, and like I don't think you can replicate that, or even close to it, until you've actually been in that, sitting in that seat. Like, how are you able to? I guess, how's your relationship with social media evolved on that? Like, in terms of just, in more broadly, like what people think, the judgment from others, dealing with hateful commentary, which I'm sure you still probably get, not to that extreme and for different reasons, but like, just talk about that and like how that's evolved and how that specific moment helped shape like what transpired after.
Yeah, so well, that moment in particular, it broke me down to the point where I said I don't even know who I am. I mean, that's the way I felt. I was like, I don't even know what I've become. And so what that did though is when that pulled me down to rock bottom, I was like, well, I'm not going to give up. I had two options: give up or move forward. And I was like, I'm not giving up. I've always fought, and I just now need to fight harder to figure out who I actually am. And so, so then I started to dive into the commentary online. And for a lot of people were telling me not to do that. They said, you don't go shopping for pain, you'll always find it. And why would you, care what strangers have to say about you? But for me, I was trying to figure out, how to develop an understanding. I thought, there's got to be some truth in here amongst all of this negativity. Some of it's unwarranted, but some of it may be constructive criticism. And I'll never forget, there was a comment one day that I read on it was on Reddit, and it was a very hostile forum. They did not like me at all on this subreddit, but I couldn't help it. I was so curious. I kept jumping in there and reading everything. And one day I read this comment, and it just clicked. What they said was, I understand where Clayton's coming from. I see his perspective, but what bothers me is that he has still not taken accountability for the pain that he caused. He's so hyper focused on defending his viewpoint and trying to get people to understand why he did what he did. But what he should be focusing on is just taking accountability for the pain that he caused. And there was a light bulb moment that I realized that I can sit here and explain, my intentions all day. But the fact of the matter is that people perceived my intentions differently than what I anticipated. But beyond that, because I was so focused on explaining my intentions, I couldn't accept accountability for what I had done. It didn't matter if I wasn't trying to hurt those girls on the show. It didn't matter if I wasn't trying to make them cry. The fact of the matter is I hurt them. They did cry. They did experience pain. And I should have just, said, I'm sorry. I don't need to keep explaining my intentions, because the problem is sometimes a lot of people will do this. We'll explain our intentions, and what it does is it hurts people more, because all they want is someone to say, I'm sorry. Not I'm sorry that you felt that way, or that, because that's also dodging responsibility. I'm sorry you feel.
Yeah, that's even worse.
Yeah, it's like, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but that's not the way I meant it. It's like it's dodging a responsibility, and I've definitely done that in my life, where I didn't realize that was causing more pain, but I just that comment hit me, and I was like, you know what, I need to just realize that I have to quit dodging responsibility. But why am I dodging responsibility? And I realized it's like, well, because I don't want to admit that I'm wrong. Because if I admit that I'm wrong, the people pleaser in me will feel that it'll give people further reasons to not like me. And that's why I was so fearful of being wrong. Because I thought if I'm wrong, people will think less of me. But in reality was me trying to defend being right was causing people to think less of me. So that comment really started to change my outlook, and I said, okay, I'm going to start trying to understand the other sides. And I'm going to tell my ego, like, hey, ego, chill out. You're going to just be wrong and be okay with being wrong. And it doesn't really matter. Let's just figure out why people feel the way they feel.
Isn't that crazy though? Like, because I'm just thinking about myself, and like I used to be the exact same way. Like I could not admit I was wrong. There was such like an ego part of me that was like, you can't admit you're wrong. It's like, now I want to be like, please tell me, like, if I'm wrong, like I want to learn. Like
Yeah.
I feel like once you become more secure in yourself, there's so much out there that I don't know. There are so many like social constructs and biases that I had growing up, that because of my environment that I was raised in, that I have my perspective I hold true, that I've since unlearned, and like that's exciting.
Absolutely, man. That's a sign of a secure ego, is when you can go, please. Like I tell people, I'm like, hey, this is what I believe. They go, well, that's wrong. I said, is it? They're like, yeah. Like I'm like, well, yeah. Like prove, like show me. If I'm wrong, like that's great, because like it's not even about being right. It's like I want to learn. That's what it is at this point. So when people say, oh, that's wrong, I'm like, oh, it is. I'm like, well, like great. This now I'm about to learn something new. But that takes someone that's secure and says like, I realize that I can be wrong and people won't think any less of me. And if they do, that's fine. Like they can. And honestly, though, the people that are closest to me, my loved ones and friends, they real like no one expects perfection. So if I'm wrong, they'll just be like, "You're a dumbass. That's completely wrong." And then like that'll be it, and we'll just move on, and they'll kind of crack a joke and be like, "Where's your common sense?" or whatever. But like I don't have to be concerned that like, oh, they're gonna think less of me and they're not gonna be my friend, right? Like because the people closest to me love me for who I am, and they've seen me mess up so many times, and they know that I'm gonna mess up more in the future. But they still stick around. So yeah, it's cool when you can get to that point and be like, please, teach me because I don't care to be right. I just want to learn.
Man, so I want to go back to, you're standing at the back door in that moment, and there's like millions of comments, or maybe thousands, I don't know, but like just saying a ton of different things about you, and you're at a point where you're like, who am I? And maybe at some point in everyone's life we come across that same point, but maybe not to the magnitude that you were going through it with. If you could go back to that guy standing at the door and be a voice that breaks through that noise, what would you tell that person standing there? Like, what's that one pivotal piece of advice that you think you'd go back and impart?
You know what? I just had this. So I was thinking, like you said, if I could go there and like, let's say I could go time travel and go back to that point, and me now, if I could go and tell him, that version of me, some bit of advice, the only thing I would say is keep going, don't give up. And I won't be able to, you won't be able to see it, but I have on my screensaver. It's this. It says you can barely see it, but it says everything happens for a reason. Don't give up. And all I would tell myself in that moment is don't give up, because I had to go through everything that I went through.
Your prior self, if you told him something like wisdom, your prior self would have said, "Fuck that! Like that doesn't mean anything right now."
Exactly. My former self wouldn't have understood what I now know, and so I had to be that exact version of me in that moment in order to become this version of me. So I honestly probably wouldn't say anything. If someone said, hey, you can press this button and go back and say something to him, I wouldn't press it because I'd be like, I needed to get to that lowest point. Because I find it very, very interesting how at my lowest point, I said, who am I? And at my highest point, which happened recently, I was like, I am me. You know, that like that was it was a full circle moment.
Man, yeah.
And that's why I had to get to my lowest point in order to eventually get to my highest point.
There's like a paradox, right? It's like don't give up, but at the same time, part of the process is surrendering to it. Like whatever has happened, like I'm in this present moment for a reason, and like there is a future. I just need to kind of let things be, but at the same time, I'm not going to give up. It's interesting to think about it,
Yeah,
almost
man.
like a paradox.
Yeah, and I mean, you worded that so well. You just had my whole thing was is every day I set a goal for myself. I said just, beat yesterday every day. Some people say be 1% better, every day, each and every day, whatever it is. But for me, I was like, all I need to do is just try to beat yesterday's version of myself, and eventually I will be standing in that present moment and I'll look back and be like, holy hell, look how far you've come. And so I just made it a realistic goal, learn something new every day. One thing. If I learn 10 things, great, but if I can only learn one, that's still progress.
How important is that to celebrate kind of like the progress, celebrate you celebrate like proud of yourself. Go back and look a year ago. Oh wow, like I look at where I was a year ago. If I take myself back to that moment, I'd be pretty damn proud of where I'm at today. Like how is it? Like I just think that's been super important for me, and like not getting tied up in the results and just enjoying the process. And one way to do that is to celebrate the little wins.
Monumental. It's integral. You have to. If you don't, like, you'll get lost in the progress, like in the process, and then you'll all of a sudden be like, well, what progress have I made? And a lot of times, like we're very like we tend to lose sight of our progress unless we track it. I think progress tracking is incredibly important. So when I was on the show, I kept a journal. And it's funny because again, the words matter. If you'd have told me, well, like here's a diary, write in it, I was like, no, like the immature version of myself was like, I'm not writing a diary, that's for girls. But then somebody, I had this conversation with a friend of mine, and he turned me on to journaling, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna write in a diary. He goes, dude, just call it a journal. He's like, if you call it a journal, does it feel like a little bit more manly to you? I was like, yeah, I guess. And he's like, then call it a journal and just start writing. And it was funny because like my fragile ego, this trying to be a manly man, like needed to just call it a journal. And the second I called it a journal, all of a sudden my viewpoint changed on it. But why I think journaling is so incredible is because I wrote in that thing, and I wrote in it for a few months, and then I just stored it away in a safe that I have. And then I went back to it. I've went back to it multiple times. But what it's awesome is that journal serves as an anchor point. So I went back, that like I went back and read it, and I'm like, wow, this is from 9 months ago. Look at the thoughts that you had. Your intellect has grown substantially, and I can see it because these words that I'm using in this journal now feel elementary. I can see the growth because I'm not even speaking in the same vernacular that I once was. And that's what's so incredibly powerful. And you can track progress in multiple different ways. I tell people when I train them online, like fitness clients, I said, hey, take progress photos. You know why it's so important? Because every day we look in the mirror. We typically all brush our teeth and look in the mirror. So we're looking at our bodies every day. The problem is our reference points, our anchor points, they keep resetting. So the last reference point was probably a day ago, if not probably 12 hours ago, because we look at ourselves brushing our teeth in the morning and at night, when we go to bed. So, and you may look at yourself more in your body more often than that. So I tell people, like, take a photo of yourself, because that photo will stick as an anchor point. And then 3 months later, you'll go back and look at that photo, and that your reference points will be 3 months apart, not 12 hours or 24 hours apart when you look in the mirror. And this is why when people see friends that they hadn't seen in months, their friends go, "Oh my gosh, you've lost all this weight. Like, you look incredible." And they go, I do. It's always the people that haven't seen you for a few months that are like the first to notice, because their reference points are spread apart, whereas ours are typically separated by 12 hours or 24 hours. So that's why it's so important to track progress. It's huge.
Yeah, man, that's so special. I mean, I just think about when my mom like shows me a letter I wrote when I was 7, and it's like your level of intelligence, your grammar, the way you wrote, the way you thought as a kid to where you are now. But to apply that to journaling is another concept I never thought about, is like you can really start to document, really memorialize reference points as to like, this is how I thought about what I was grateful for. This is what I thought about like my daily affirmations should sound like. And to be able to start to document that and then create that library to then look back at it and say, wow, when I was in my late 20s, this is what I was grateful for versus where I'm at in my mid 30s. Like, I always thought about it as a helpful exercise in the moment. Never did I think about it as a reference anchor to then go back and look at it in that regard. That's really cool.
Yeah, I love that, because I'll do that. I wish I would have started journaling right at the beginning of my self-healing journey, because I would have loved to read some of those thoughts that I had. But what I will do is look at, like, my whole thing was like struggling with my sexuality, and I struggled with my whole life, and I was finally kind of able to I went through a very painful but eventually beautiful process of self-acceptance, healing, all that stuff. And I will still look back occasionally at like messages that I sent, like coming out for the first time to a couple of my close friends, and just looking at the way I viewed myself at that point. And I'll come and look now, and it is just mind-boggling. And anytime I'm kind of like, oh man, like I'm not where I want to be, I'll look back and I'll just be like, you think about where you were a year and a half ago to think about where you are now, even a year ago, like you would have been the happiest person in the world. And so I think that's why, like, you have your example of people, especially like looking at their bodies, but it applies to everything. And I think to what you just said, journaling is such a powerful way to do that.
Dude, I love that, and it's so cool. I mean, I'm super happy for you. Like, it's when you're able to, yeah, like you go back and you say, look at like these old messages, and past version of me, if they could see like peer into the future and see who I am right now, they would be blown away. And not only would they be blown away, but they would be so encouraged. And that's why it's so great to go back and and have those anchor points. And some people, they go, well, I don't know where to start. And it's like, that's the cool thing about journaling. It's like, they're like, well, I can't write a whole page worth. Like, you don't have to write a page worth. Just maybe make it your goal to write one sentence. And they say, well, what should I write? It's like, whatever comes up in your head. You don't have to have any type of, structure. In fact, I think a lack of structure is even better, because typically, like, the lack of structure, I would imagine, most people I talk to, I think many of the internal dialogues that we have are very unstructured. Like, our brains just start firing off. At least mine does. Like, it's like I'll have a million different thoughts, but those are the ones that are important to capture. So yeah, it's awesome that you have like those old messages, and I think it's super important. And I would definitely recommend, if somebody's like, it's like, just start finding ways to capture these moments in time, because really documenting the progress is going to help you, motivate you, and continue to push you forward and stay determined. Because like there's times where we get to where like, man, I feel like I'm not making any headway. And that's when tracking progress comes in and just reminds you, no, I actually am making progress, and this is going to continue to push me forward. Just reminding myself how far I've come.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think about, like, I started gratitude journaling early in the beginning of the year, and at first I was like, what do I write? I'm going to write just my friends, family, and my dog. Like, I'm going to write that every day. And now it's like, it just evolves, and it comes so easy, and you realize how much you actually have when you write it down every single day, and you realize, like, oh, shoot, yeah, I have a dog. I also have a roof over my head. Like, I'm also able to work out every day. Like, I'm also able to afford a gym. Like, there's so many things that we then realize. Another one, like, there's a journaling prompt that I write in every day. One thing you're proud about yourself. And it just helps improve that, like, positive self-talk. Because so many people have this, like, we all have the inner critic. But if you can write down one thing you're proud of each day, you're like, holy crap, I'm 25 days in. I've written 25 things I'm proud about myself. I didn't even realize I was proud about these things until I actually started reflecting on it. So journaling is super, super powerful. I have to ask you, and this came up to me this was not a topic or question I had written down, but it's something I thought of, and I know like I'm not a huge fan of the hypotheticals, but I'm going to ask it. How do you think your experience on The Bachelor would have been different if you were in this version of Clayton relative to your prior version?
That's a great question. Oh man, yeah. Well, so the hard part about it is
Yeah, I know it's a hard question.
it's hard because I'm this version because I went through that
Yeah.
tough time. So I would just say this though, if I, was confident in the whole show would have been different.
Yeah.
The whole show would have been different. I wouldn't have tried to appease, the women, the producers, and the audience. I would have just focused on doing, what I felt was best, and I would have stood my ground and said, these are my morals, values, and beliefs, and I'm not willing to, divert from them. Now, I will say this: I don't really feel like I really had to sacrifice my morals, values, or beliefs on the show. I will say that. So I don't want people to think that I'm saying, oh, like, I was manipulated. It's not that. It's. I think I would have just done what I would have done, and then when people would have, started to attack what I did, this version of me would have been like, well, that's me. So I'm not gonna try to defend it. I'll just say I'm sorry for hurting people, but like I did what I thought was best. That this version of me would just basically be like, well, what you saw was 100% authentically me. So if you don't like it, that's okay, and you have every right to not like what you saw. But and I can apologize for hurting people. I'm sorry that I did, but ultimately I did what I thought was best. That's what this version of me would walk out of it, and I think it would have absolutely looked different as far as what all would have went down. But the old version of me was, got very defensive, and my ego jumped to the forefront and was like, no, 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 you guys are all. I remember thinking this. I was just like, I got super defensive. I didn't say this publicly, but I was like, everyone that watched this show is a bunch of idiots. Like, how do you guys not see these things? Like, I got super defensive. I'm like, and my ego was just like, these people are all just dummies. That's what it is. It's not you. It's that you have this audience of, pea brains, that, and like like I seriously I had all these thoughts in my head, and I can say it now because it's like, again, someone goes, well, thought we were stupid. It's like, well, no, my ego was trying to justify all the negativity coming my way. It was just trying to push off all of the, the redirect the line of fire, and push it back on them. As my ego was like, no, you're not the problem, they're the problem. But the problem is that I didn't know who I was, and I was trying to appease everybody, and therefore I became the problem because I was doing things that, if I was 100% authentically me and I had all the self-love in the world that I have now, I wouldn't have been, taking certain actions that I did.
I want to ask one more question. Do you think, again, this is like, I don't watch that much of the show, and this could be totally raw, just something that came up. Do you think they try to intentionally choose, the producers, people that are not super secure? Do you think they do any of that searching to create a more dramatic show? Like, I don't know, maybe you can look back and look at the contestants and the people that were on it, and you can be like, oh no, a lot of them were super secure and like loved themselves. Or do you think that's like something maybe they're not primarily searching for? Do you think it plays any sort of role? I'm just curious, like when they're putting
on the
together
application,
the
like on a scale of 1 to 10, how insecure?
yeah,
are you?
like not like that, but like you can tell through an interview. You ask people questions, you can kind of get a gauge.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna speak on myself because I think it's the easiest thing to speak on. I'm like, I've seen a lot of people on the show. I could sit here and tell you whether or not I think they're secure, but I can tell you this much: I truthfully believe this, and this is just my opinion. So it can be right or wrong; it doesn't matter. I absolutely believe part of the reason that I was selected to be the Bachelor was because I was so insecure, and I believe that the show felt that they could then kind of steer me along, because if I was fully secure in myself, they would have seen me more as like, this guy may be really hard to work with because he's going to like hold his ground,
Yeah.
and he's not going to fight back, or he will fight back if he's secure in himself. I absolutely, my intuition, everything tells me that because I was insecure, they saw that as like, oh, this guy is going to be really easy to work with, because he's going to give in and do what we want.
It's a hell of a question. Like a hell of a.
Well, it was my intuition. As we're speaking, we're speaking about it, I'm like thinking in the producer's head, like if you're really trying to create the most dramatic show, like someone who's super secure and like confident, like the version you just described of yourself when you were answering the question beforehand, there's no drama. There's not going to be any drama in that. It's gonna be a very mature conversation. It's like they've got the new show, I forgot what it's called, but like the Golden Bachelor or something, where it's like the older people. And like the conversations are so genuine, everyone's so understanding, and it's cute because they're all old people, and it's like 60-year-olds trying to find love, but like everything is, and it's my type of show. I love it because I'm like, this is so like heartwarming and real and authentic, but like I don't get that same sense from the.
Yeah, I mean, well, someone with too much conviction is just going to pick the one and go that course, but like you kind of need a leaf in the wind to create that dramatic effect, because you're going to bend over backwards to appease literally 30 different women and producers, and that makes a lot of sense. I just was complimentary to the question.
You become a wrecking ball. You sway over here and you try to appease. Sway over here, you try to appease the producers. You sway over here, you try to appease the audience, and you're just swinging back and forth, and it's like there's no sense of stability, and that's what you want for a TV show. You want a ton of instability.
Which is like not what you want in the journey of finding a companion.
No, I didn't want that, but like it's for entertainment.
No, I know.
Instability is going to create the most dramatic show, and like what ended up happening was, I probably had one of the most dramatic endings in recent history. Like I actually, they say it every year, the most dramatic season, but I probably had one of the most dramatic seasons as of recently, and I wasn't trying to do it. I was just trying to be me, and I was actually trying to steer clear of all the drama. But then I became it. I was the one that was just wrecking everything in my sight, because I just was trying to find a way to make everybody happy and make everyone stay impressed with me. And it's like, you can't keep the women producers and fans happy and yourself all at once. It's not possible.
Especially on national television.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's impossible.
You seem like you're living so much lighter and freely now that you've kind of latched onto authenticity. And I'm just curious, one thing we didn't talk about way in the beginning of your story was your relationship with your brother. Because comparison can be the thief of joy, and I'm sure there was a lot of envy there. I always wonder about like the brothers or sisters of famous celebrities, athletes, superstars. Like, could you imagine being the brother of a Michael Jordan, for example? Like what does that do for somebody? And so I'm curious, as you've evolved into this authentic form of yourself, like how did your relationship with your brother evolve along with it?
Yeah, great question, man. I hated my brother growing up, and he knows this, because I told him, recently, I said, it's really sad, but like I hated you. I felt like the reason why I wasn't good enough was because everyone was comparing me to you, and I wished at points you weren't my brother. I was like, you're making my life so much tougher by existing. But the thing was, and it's really sad to say that, like I think I hid it from him. He didn't know. And so at least that was good. It wasn't wearing up on him. But now, I mean, he's one of my best friends. I love him to death. I wouldn't be the person that I am today if it wasn't for him, because, in a way I looked up to him because he was so secure in himself. He's always been secure in himself. I'm not going to say he doesn't have mental health struggles, but like he's one of the most confident people I know, and he's always been that way. He just always believed in himself. And I started to kind of look up to him, even though he's 2 years younger than me. I'm like, this is what a confident, loving, person looks like. He's just him. Like he just is his goofy self, and he doesn't care if people like him or doesn't like him. He's like I am me, and again, he never said those words, but like he didn't have to be anything other than himself. And so I still nowadays, I mean, I find it funny because he doesn't really care about, at least to the level that I do. I'm so geeked out on self-improvement, and he'll just sit there and watch football all day, and I'm like, dude, don't you want to like grow within yourself? He's like, no, I'm good. I was like, well, don't you want to like better yourself? And he's like, what do I need to better? Like I'm great, life's good. And I was like, don't you feel like you can improve upon some stuff? He's like, no, not really. I don't feel like I'm good. He's like, I mean, life's good. I got a good job. I like what I do, whatever. And but that's his thing, is like he's just never felt like he had to live up to some standard seemingly. So yeah, now I mean, I definitely have looked to him over my life, and when I realized, I was like, this kid, this kid who's my brother, embodies a secure individual, and I can take notes from him. Um, I give him trouble sometimes because I'm like, man, you like read a book or something, and he's like, now he does, but his whole thing was he was like, I don't need to, like, if I want to read a book, I'll read a book. If I want to grow, I'll grow, and I need to grow, but I don't feel this pressure to be anything more than I am. So yeah, it was an evolution. I really despised him at first, but then his presence pushed me to try to outdo him. So I spent, when I went to college and I was playing for Mizzou as a walk-on, I was like, yeah, I walked on at Mizzou. Now he's still in high school. Well, then what happened? He got a full ride scholarship to Illinois. Well, then I was like, okay, well now I got to like start, because now he has a full ride scholarship, so I got to get a scholarship. So then I got a scholarship, and then I started, and I was like, all right, cool. Now he's got to start. Well, then he started, and I was like, damn it. So then I went to the NFL, and I was like, well, I got to go to the NFL. And then he blows his knee out, and he's like, I'm not going to try to go to the NFL. I was like, all right, cool. Now we're good. But at that point in my life, if he had went, I actually wanted him to make it to the NFL. I had gotten to that place where I was like, you're driving me, and you're my competition in my eyes, but it's a healthy competition now. I want to beat you, but like it doesn't matter if I do or don't, because I've made it far enough.
We kind of just throw this out there like it's nothing. I made it to the NFL. Like, that's elite. That is like top 0.0 something percent of people to get to that level, but then to not actually be that committed to it seemingly, right? Like you said, it was a shorter career. I'm just wondering, like, did you kind of leave on your own terms and when coming into like self-actualization, or was it more of just like you couldn't keep up with it?
No, I got cut. I mean, I got cut from the Seahawks final round of cuts. I do believe that looking back, I was absolutely good enough. I could have made it in the NFL. It wasn't that I lacked the talent. It's just there's so few spots. There's so many talented individuals. You could go down to the 4th-string guy on the depth chart, and if you decided to take from 32 teams to 40 teams and take the guys from the down on the depth chart, you would actually find some superstars that would come out of the woodworks. They're just stuck down the depth chart behind guys that don't hardly ever make mistakes. I mean, the guys at that level are so talented that they don't mess up. And if they do, well, then it's the next man up. So sometimes guys just get buried down the depth chart, and they're super talented, but like they just maybe were late bloomers, and so they're waiting. Unfortunately, it's like the only way they're going to play is if someone ahead of them gets injured, because like you're talking about the best of the best. They don't mess up. So they hardly do. So what happened was I got cut, and then 6 months later, I was still training, but then I went back to medical sales, and I was kind of like, well, I'm going to keep kind of training, but I feel like it's over. And then 6 months later, the Panthers called. But at that point, I had a girlfriend, and I was thinking about proposing to her, and I was like, I need to, make some money. I can't keep bouncing back and forth, jumping on rosters. So I declined their invitation to go to the Panthers. And I regretted that for a long while, because I was like, I should have just, that was a once in a lifetime opportunity. I thought medical sales was going to be more than what it was at that point. So I was like, I can't leave medical sales. Like, what happens if I can't get back into it? The reality was I could have gotten back into it a million times over, but the NFL was fleeting. And I really regretted that decision for a while. But it is what it is. I think everything happens for a reason. But yeah, I also got a couple concussions, and I started to have headaches. I never had headaches that persisted, but when I got concussed in the NFL, I started having these headaches that stuck around for a solid 5-6 months. It was just lingering, and I realized, I'm like, you know what, it's not worth it. I don't want to suffer, brain damage, and look back and wish that I hadn't subjected myself to it. So I just thought, well, that was the reason why when the Panthers called, I was like, I don't want to, put my body under that beating again. And so at that moment, I decided to just step away.
That's crazy. 5-6 months of headaches, man. That's scary stuff. All right, Clayton, we've got 3 rapid fire questions to wrap this up. The first one is, what is you showed us your phone screen, so maybe it's this, but what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given, or your favorite quote?
Yeah, I'll do a favorite quote because it's one that I recently, and it ties into mental health very much so. So I heard this quote recently. It was regurgitated on a podcast, but Tom Holland, the Spider-Man actor, he's the one that said this quote, and it really resonated with me because again, I was still fighting through trying to live my life for me and nobody else. And so what he said was, if you have a problem with me, text me, and if you don't have my phone number, you don't know me well enough to have a problem with me.
I love that.
That just I saw, it was actually a clip that Jay Shetty posted, but when I saw that clip, man, it just hit me so hard, and I was like, this is a turning point in my life. I am only going to allow those that have my phone number that truly know me well enough. Those are the only people that I'm going to care about their opinions. And if you're a stranger that doesn't have my number, then I don't care what you.
I mean, for somebody who was all over Reddit, I'm sure that quote's really important to you.
Massively, because like, do I still read the comments? Yeah, but now I laugh at them. I mean, I kind of just laugh. I'm like, they think that this comment is going to get to me, and I don't care. And honestly, beyond laughing though, sometimes I'll just feel empathetic because I'll be like,
Yeah.
man, like, how miserable do you have to be to put that comment out here? You clearly don't love yourself. You're projecting your insecurities. And so I started to, see it in that light. I'm like, man, I feel bad for that person. I hope they can, find their happiness, but you're not going to take mine away.
Yeah, sometimes those are the people you have to actually show the most compassion to, because the people that have done the work know what it's like to be down there. It's not fun, and it's painful and all that stuff. I love it. Yeah, I love that quote. I saw the same thing with Jay Shetty. It was awesome interview, by the way. If anyone hasn't listened to that one, it's great.
Incredible. Yeah.
The next question: if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
The Rock.
Oh, I love that. Yeah,
Because
Isn't that your answer too?
it was one. Yeah, he's top 3 for sure.
Yeah, because for me, he is everything I've heard about him for like in the entertainment industry. He treats everyone with respect, and as famous and as big time as he is, I've heard he's never let the fame get to his head. He stays humble, and he just, his tagline, hardest worker in the room. I love it. It's like the guy he just shows up, and he's just him. I mean, I think he does a great job on his social media of really like showing people who he actually is. I love it. He does this thing where he rolls up to like these tour buses, and he'll roll his window down and be like, "Hey, like, how y'all doing?" And like they're on this like celebrity sighting tour bus, and he, again, this guy's like the most famous dude on the planet, and he just sits there and chats people up. I have so much respect for him, so that would easily him. And then second to him, I'm just gonna just because I want to throw it out there, Jason Momoa. He's another guy that I think is super cool and does a lot for his community locally, and I look up to those two guys.
Have you seen the do you know Trevor Noah?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I know.
Have you heard he just did a podcast with The Rock? You should, if you haven't listened to it. Like, The Rock did a couple. He did the one with Joe Rogan, then he just did one with Trevor Noah. And the one with Trevor Noah is really, really good. Highly recommend anyone. That's a good one.
I'll listen to it. Love it.
And then the last question is, what do you like to do in your free time, like hobbies?
The first thing that popped into my head, I'll just say because it popped up. I like eating pizza, but the tie into that is that in my free time, I like to really just like decompress. I'm always around people. My jobs that I hold are all relationship focused, so I'm always entertaining. I'm always around people. So my hobbies are really sometimes just being able to like be by myself and just love those moments. Order some pizza, turn on a Netflix show, and then just be happy with being there by myself. That's so critical, and it helps rejuvenate me. So that's a big thing that I love. And then I'll just throw that out here to answer the question too, like a hobby. I love snowboarding. Same reason though. I love snowboarding because I can just throw in some headphones and it's just me in the mountains, and I can just shut off and enjoy nature and do something active. And we have that, 2.5 hours north of me, we have mountains where you can just drive up and snowboard too. So I that's a big hobby of mine.
I love it. All right, Clayton, thank you so much for coming on, for being vulnerable, open, honest, authentic, you name it, man. It was such a good conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate it.